My name is Debra Loder. I'm the registered dietitian and dietary manager here at Wickenburg Community Hospital in Wickenburg, Arizona. And today we're going to talk about something called pulses. When I first heard that word, I thought, oh, that's my pulse. Well, that is my pulse, but today we're talking about food pulses. Pulses are legumes, basically. So when we talk about legumes and pulses, we talk about a variety of things. Legumes are up here, and that includes soybeans and fresh peas, like peas in the pod that you get, and you usually get them frozen, or sugar snap peas, things like that. So those are the fresh peas. And then on the other side is fresh green beans. So they are the green beans like we eat. We get them in a can, or we get them fresh, and we make that yummy green bean casserole at the holidays. So those are the green beans. And then peanuts. Peanuts are also legumes. But pulses are the beans and chickpeas, lentils, and dried peas. So those are the pulses. So basically, a pulse is the seed that grows inside of the pod. So today we're going to talk about a lot of different pulses, and we'll kind of look first at why we should have pulses in our diet, and then we'll talk about how to incorporate them. And I know a lot of you are sitting there and worrying, oh my goodness, am I going to have to start eating beans, because they do cause gas for a lot of people, and it can be very uncomfortable. But I'll try to help you with some ways that you can eliminate that, or at least make it minimal, and so you're not uncomfortable. So once again, pulses are legumes, or the seed that grows in the pod. And they have a lot of really, really good benefits for us, for our health. And some of the reasons are they're good for our bone health. They are good to help prevent cancer because they have a lot of fiber in them, and fiber is known to help us to eliminate cancer, especially like colorectal cancers. The other thing is they are really good for us to help us either manage or avoid diabetes, because the fiber in them helps to regulate blood glucose. So there's a lot of other reasons, and one of those is to help reduce the birth defects, because they're very high in folate, which is one of the nutrients that women need during pregnancy to help avoid birth defects in their babies. They're also good for our hearts, especially when we don't add a lot of sodium to them. So they're really good if we can just eat them plain, to help with heart disease. And once again, that's primarily because of the fiber in them, but they are full of a lot of nutrients. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the nutritional characteristics, and I have a little table here, and I know you can't see it because we don't have a PowerPoint today. We can't do that in Facebook Live very effectively. So I have this, which is on a PowerPoint, but I'm going to have to kind of read it for you. So nutritional characteristics of pulses are the fiber, the minerals, the vitamins, and the protein. So those are the main reasons that we want to get pulses into our bodies, into our diet. So if we look at chickpeas, which are the garbanzo beans, and a cup of them cooked has about 269 calories, very little fat, 4.3 grams, and then sodium, only 11 milligrams of sodium, so very low in sodium if we don't add salt to them. They are a carbohydrate food, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along, but they're a really good carbohydrate food. They're called a complex carbohydrate. They have fiber of that carbohydrate, 45 grams of carbohydrate, 12.5 of those are in the form of fiber. They are also high in protein, like I said, so a cup of them has 14 grams of protein. And then vitamin A, they have 44 international units of vitamin A. And then calcium, milligrams of calcium is 180, which is, I'm sorry, it's 80, which is really good. That's a lot of calcium. And then folate, like I said a while ago before, they have 282 micrograms of folate in them, and we need 400 micrograms a day. So you can see that just 1 cup of cooked beans has a lot of folate. Lentils, about the same across the board, 230 calories, a few fewer calories, a little bit less of carbohydrates to protein ratio. And then split peas and lentils are right up there as well, with the protein really high and the complex carbohydrate and fiber in the really good range. So those are some of the reasons that we want to eat pulses, is because they're really good for us. They're very nutritious. Like it says, it's a powerhouse of nutrition. So when we think about my plate, we've talked about my plate before. So when we think about my plate and pulses, I want to explain that pulses are in 2 food groups. They can be a vegetable, or they can be a protein. If they're the vegetable, they are a starchy vegetable. So we have non-starchy vegetables, which would be things like broccoli, cauliflower, and lettuce, and carrots. Those are non-starchy vegetables. But starchy vegetables include the beans, the peas, corn, things like that, potatoes, sweet potatoes, winter squash. Those are all kind of starchy vegetables. So if you are going to use the beans in as your vegetable for a meal, it's 1 cup to 1 cup. So 1 cup of whole or mashed beans or peas or lentils is equal to 1 cup of vegetable, starchy vegetable. If you're going to use them as your protein, you would use 1/4 of a cup of cooked beans or lentils or peas as 1 ounce equivalent. So when we think about, when I talk to you about using beans for your protein, sometimes I say a 1/2 cup of beans would be an appropriate serving size. Well, that would be 2 ounce equivalents, or equivalent to 2 ounces of meat. So that's 1/4 of a cup. A lot of times we talk about 3 ounces of protein per meal, and that's the size of the palm of my hand if you're talking about meat or poultry or fish. So if we were going to get 3 ounces of protein from our beans or peas or lentils, then we would eat 3/4 of a cup, because 1/4 of a cup is equal to 1 ounce of meat. So I hope that makes sense. So they're really, really good sources of protein, and it's really a small serving size. I think that a lot of us probably eat at least a cup of beans when we have them, like in a bean soup or a split pea soup, something like that. So the My Plate recommendation is that we add more lentils, chickpeas, and split peas and beans to our diet. Some of the other great things about them are they go well with a gluten-free diet because they are gluten-free, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but a lot of the pulses are used to make flours, which are used in gluten-free baking. Another thing is they're really good for a diabetic diet because of the fiber, and because of that fiber, the carbohydrate digests slower, so the effect on our blood glucose is slower, and so it tends, like if you have a spoonful of sugar, your blood glucose will go up in a peak, but when you have something that has fiber, it won't peak as much. It'll just be a gentle raise in blood glucose. The other thing is they're really good for weight management. Because of the fiber, they fill us up and we stay full longer. So that's a great reason to incorporate more pulses into your diet. And then they're also vegetarian. So when a person is vegetarian, sometimes they will eat eggs and milk. But if a person is vegan, then they won't eat any dairy or eggs or any animal products. So this is great for them to have lots of pulses and to have a variety of pulses because of the protein content. And there is a lot, if you tuned into some of my plant-based sessions, then you'll remember me saying that there's research out there that indicates that a more plant-based diet is really important for our health. Eating the Mediterranean way, which incorporates more plant-based foods and less animal-based foods. It's okay to have animal protein. That's great. That's fine. But vegetable proteins tend to be less calories, less fat in them, and also have the high fiber content, which is really good for us. So I know that a lot of people kind of steer clear of lentils and chickpeas and split peas and things like that because they do take a bit of cooking. If you're going to start with the fresh, with the dried product here, like I have in the bags, it does need a little bit more preparation time. So how do you do that when you're on a busy schedule? Well, we have crock pots, we have now Instapots. So those are great tools to help us cook dried beans, which have to cook for quite a while. There's also soaking methods where you sort your beans and take out any debris that might be in them, and then you rinse them under cool water, and then cover them with boiling water, leave them for about an hour, and then cook them. And that means that they take, depending on the size of the bean and the age of the bean, they might take anywhere from an hour to 2 or 3 hours just on the stovetop. But you could put them into the crock pot and they would cook while you're at work. If you do it in an Instant Pot, I think some beans take as little as 30 minutes to cook in the Instant Pot. So it's a great tool if you are short on time. But there's nothing better than having a pot of beans on the back burner of the stove cooking away all day. The smell is fabulous and just keeps your tummy ready for food at any minute. And so that's a great thing to do on Saturday or Sunday when you're home and able to tend to them and keep them covered with water so they don't scorch. As a matter of fact, today in the kitchen, in the employee kitchen, and Sabrina doesn't like it when I mention her in my Facebook Live, but she is making nachos today for our employees, and one of the toppings for the nachos is pinto beans. And of course we got them out of a can, and that's okay. We'll talk about that. It's all right to eat beans out of the can. But I went in there a while ago and it smelled so good. So I had to have a spoon of those beans because they just were calling me to have a spoon of them. So all of the pulses basically cook in the same way. Remember, the fresher they are, the faster they cook, and then the smaller they are, they tend to cook. So lentils cook up really quickly, and so do the split peas, and some of the other things take a lot longer, like the large lima beans that are there on the front, and then something that I've got over here that is called mortgage lifter beans. And I've read a few stories about mortgage lifters, but it's something like a farmer had such a great crop of them that he was able to sell them and take care of his mortgage. That was one of the stories I read. But there's a lot of different bean names, and I don't know what all of them are or why they have those names. So what about storing pulses? Well, we want to store pulses in a dry place. So if they are bags or like in the jars, they need to be kept dry so that they won't sprout. Once they've sprouted, unless you were going to go ahead and cook them and use them as sprouted pulses, which you can do, they would go bad and they would get mildewy and musty and wouldn't be very good to eat. So you want to store them really in an airtight, dry environment. And that's why at home I keep them in jars like this. Actually, these little jars that I have here came out of big gallon jars that I have up on top of one of my cabinets. And I have just jars and jars and jars of beans because we really love them. I'll tell you a little bit about some of them. These are pinto beans, and these come from southwest Colorado from a town called Dove Creek. And I was blessed to live in that part of the country for 16, 17, 18 years. It was a really great place to live, cool, and lots of farming areas. So we had a lot of farmers markets and things like that. And then up in Dove Creek, they grow a variety of beans, and there's a little place called Adobe Milling where when I'm there I go and buy beans in bulk bags. And then my sister sometimes goes up to that same area to visit our dad, and if she goes, she brings me beans back. If I go, I bring her beans back. So that's where a lot of these come from. These are Anasazi beans, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about Anasazi beans. But they also come from that area, as do these, which are called Zuni Gold. And I don't know if you can see them, but they are just beautiful, and I see where they get that name because they are a really pretty golden bean. And then these are called Colorado River beans, also come from that area, and they're another one, a small bean, similar to a cranberry bean. And then these are bolita beans, which come from the same area, sort of a little brown bean. And then I have scattered in here, these are Adzuki beans. These are good ones if you like to do bean sprouts. They make a really nice sprout. And then these over here are called rice beans. And I have to tell you, I bought these and they just intrigue me, and so I haven't cooked them because I just like to look at them. So one of these days I'm going to have to cook some. And I might be disappointed because they have been in my pantry or on top of my cabinet for probably 3 years. So I may be disappointed. But anyway, that's what the variety of beans are. There's navy beans, there's garbanzo beans, there's just a lot of different beans. So store them in a dry area, keep them cool, and then if they're cooked and canned, obviously canned beans, you want to watch the use by label, and it always says best if used by. So a lot of us let things age in our cabinets and we hate to throw it away, so just know that if the can's not dented and if there's no odors or anything when you open the can, even if it's a few months past that date, it's probably just fine to go ahead and use it, because remembering it says best by. If you have cooked them or opened the can, then you want to refrigerate them and use them within 3 or 4 days after they've been cooked. The one thing about beans is if they go bad, they really smell bad. So that's one of the things that you can, not always do we know if our food has gone bad because it may not smell, but beans I can tell you do. So let's look again at some of the reasons for us to eat beans or pulses for our health, and that is because they're an excellent source of fiber, they're a great source of protein, they're low fat, they're low sodium, they're a great source of iron, an excellent source of folate. Remember how much I said? Almost, or a little bit more than half of what we need per day in just that cup. Good source of potassium. They have a low glycemic index, which is that what I explained to you, that they're so high in fiber that it takes a while to digest them, so it doesn't raise our blood glucose as fast. Then they're gluten-free, and obviously they're cholesterol-free as well. So those are some of the top 10 reasons, but I want to talk to you about a few other reasons to eat pulses for health. I mentioned this a minute ago, but they really can help maintain your body weight because of that fiber, because they are so satisfying and keep us full for longer. They tend to reduce that crash that you might have after a meal for the same reason, because it helps stabilize our blood glucose. They can help with reducing the risk for chronic diseases such as diabetes and heart disease. And they are really good for gut health because of the fiber content. So those are some of the other reasons to eat beans, or pulses. I use those interchangeably, so pulses is what I should be saying. So we talked a little bit a while ago about the different varieties of pulses, the chickpeas or garbanzo beans. Well, I have them dry here, and I have a can of them someplace. But anyway, garbanzo beans are really good for our diet. There's a lot of different ways that you can use them. So they're really very inexpensive. Let me tell you that I think that the garbanzo beans were the most expensive of the bagged beans that I bought. I think they were $2.99. So $2.99, but there's 13 fourth cup servings in this. And so, I'm sorry, that's a fourth of a cup dry beans. So there are 13 servings once they're cooked. So that's pretty inexpensive. And some of the others were a little bit less expensive, like $2, $1.99. So they're very inexpensive, very versatile for our budget. Once again, then there's the lentils, and we have green lentils. These don't state what they are, so I don't really know. But these are lentils. There's green lentils, red lentils, small brown. I bet these are small brown, French green, and then black lentils. And then we also have the beans, and once again, we have the lima beans, the butter beans, the navy beans, the atsuki, all of these different beans over here that we've talked about. So we have health reasons to eat pulses and have more pulses in our diet, but we also have environmental reasons to eat them. Raising them makes less of a carbon footprint on our environment, and they also are really good for the earth. They do something that is called nitrogen fixing. So let me tell you, I'm going to kind of read this. Pulses are good for the earth. Pulses are nitrogen fixing crops, which means they can convert nitrogen in the air into a plant available nutrient. Pulses can reduce the need for nitrogen fertilizers, ultimately improving the environment's sustainability of annual cropping systems. So I've done a bit of gardening, and I've taught a little bit of gardening when I worked at an eating disorder facility, and that is exactly what they do, is they grab the nitrogen out of the air, bring it into the soil. And so when farmers do what we call rotation of crops, they use beans or pulses to bring the nitrogen into the soil so that the next crop that they plant there will have the available nitrogen without having to add fertilizers. So what they do is they and I don't know all of the rotation, but they'll do beans, and then in that same field the next season they may put something like corn. So that's crop rotation, and it's very fascinating to read about that, but not what we're talking about today. But just know that they are very good for our environment as well. So how do you add pulses to our meals? Like I said, I know that some people are concerned about the gas that they cause, and that's from the fiber digesting in our colon. So one of the things is to go slowly. Don't go out and eat a cup of beans today if you haven't eaten a cup of beans in the last month or so. What you want to do is start small. So you might want to start with a half a cup of beans, or you might want to just add a few beans to your salad, or add a few beans to a soup. So that would be a really good way to do it. But there are a lot of different ways that you can use beans in your diet. And you can actually use them at all 3 meals. There's a lot of recipes out there for bowls, breakfast bowls that include pulses. And so that's one of the ways you can use them. You can add them to soups. I have added garbanzo beans to spaghetti sauce and used it over pasta. Great source of plant-based protein, and you can hardly tell that it's not a meat sauce by the time it simmers and the garbanzos absorb those spices. Another way you can use them is to substitute, maybe if you're having tacos, you can substitute black beans for your meat, or you can mix half and half black beans and your ground beef or your pulled chicken or whatever to extend the meat and to also add fiber to your taco and a lot of protein. You can make a sandwich spread. One of the sandwich spreads that we use here in the hospital for our employees is we make a sandwich spread, once again, out of the garbanzo beans, and we make it just as if we were making like an egg salad or a chicken salad. We just substitute the drained and rinsed garbanzo beans and kind of mash them up, and then we spread them on. Some of our people need to have gluten-free bread, so we spread them on gluten-free bread with lettuce and tomato, and it makes a great sandwich spread. Even people who aren't vegan and can eat real bread have just loved having those garbanzo bean sandwiches. So they're really good and healthy for us. The other thing is to use them as a filling for your lasagna. You can puree navy beans or a white bean of any kind and use that instead of the ricotta cheese, and it still gives you that creamy flavor. And if you spice it up with some Italian seasonings, then you won't even miss the ricotta, and then you can go easy on your mozzarella, and it really reduces the fat content of your lasagna. You can make black bean burger patties instead of making hamburgers or turkey burgers. You can take your black beans, or really any bean, and just not puree it, but chop it up in your food process and add in some onion and celery and bell pepper, things that you like, flavors that you like. And then if you do eat eggs, add an egg for binder. If you don't eat eggs, then you could add a little bit of cornmeal or cornstarch as a binder. And then you form into patties and cook them just like you would cook a hamburger patty. Makes a great vegan patty, or at least vegetarian. There are a lot of other ways that you can use beans, especially pureed beans. I read a recipe for macaroni and cheese where you use pureed yellow split peas as part of the cheese sauce, and so you can reduce the amount of cheese in your recipe and get all that fiber with your macaroni and cheese. I've even heard ways that you can add them into brownies and cookies and things. So investigate that. And speaking of investigating, this is a great website. I discovered this website while I was getting ready for today, and it was so much fun to look at the website. There was all about pulses and a lot of information, a lot of facts about them that are really interesting, and then tons of recipes. So if you go to that website, I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I do. So it's pulses, pulses.org/US. So Monique, can they see that? Okay, thank you. So like I said a few minutes ago, I was blessed to spend a lot of years in Southwest Colorado, and so the Anasazi bean is really close to my heart because it has such a unique history. Anasazi beans actually are what we call an heirloom bean or heirloom vegetable. I don't know, there are several stories and I don't know which is absolutely the truth, but Anasazi beans were found someplace in a pot in an Indian dwelling. I want to say it was at Mesa Verde, but that's one of the stories, but I'm not going to claim that fame because I'm not absolutely 100% because I've heard other stories. But they were found, the beans were found in a pot, and they were dry, and so they were dry, they were cool, but they were ancient. They were really, really old. But they were sent to the University of Colorado, I believe, and they were able to actually sprout them and then grow them several crops and then keep collecting the seed. And now they're widely planted and harvested in that Four Corner area. They can be purchased at the what did I just say? In Dove Creek, Colorado. They can be purchased online. They're a little bit harder to find in grocery stores. I have seen them at places like Sprouts and Trader Joe's, but if you go online to Adobe Milling in Dove Creek, Colorado, you can order them from there. So they are one of those heirlooms, and this, I don't know how these things happen, but I happened to go to Safeway this morning for the hospital groceries, and I decided I would look at a few beans there and see if I could bring something to show. And I found these up on the top shelf in Safeway, up on the very top. My eyes just went up there, and I found these heirloom beans, and this one's called Jacob's Cattle, and it says it's called Jacob's Cattle because the vivid splashes of maroon are named for their resemblance to a herd of cattle, and they've been a long time favorite bean. Well, one of the facts that I saw about Anasazi beans is they're also called Jacob's Cattle beans. So that just was really interesting to me to see that. I also found these yellow eye beans, and these say that they have the slightly nutty flavor and a creamy texture, and they're named for the yellow color around the eye of the bean. The eye of the bean is right here, and if you take a pinto bean, probably any bean, you can take a little jar and fill it up with damp paper towels, and then put beans down against the glass and watch them sprout. Keep them damp but not soaking wet, and that they actually sprout from that little eye place. So that's kind of a fun science experiment for kids who are being homeschooled because of COVID. So that's kind of a neat little thing you can do with your kiddos, and they grow and they make a little vine of leaves, and kind of fun to watch grow. So try that at home. And then these are called European Soldier, and they are also an heirloom variety. And it says these white beans get their name from the red spot around the eye of the bean, thought to resemble a toy soldier. It does a little bit. Monique, it does, doesn't it?
It does.
Yep. So, and they have the flavor, buttery flavor. So I'm really excited to learn more about these and sample them. And then this one's called a pinquito, and these are they're exclusively grown in California, and they're a pink bean, and they have a long-standing tradition as an integral part of Santa Maria barbecue. So these are actually cooked or canned in a seasoned sauce. So they're not just in water. These are just in water. So if you buy any of these beans in the grocery in the water like this, you want to look for low sodium, and then you also want to drain them and rinse them off before you use them in your recipe, and that will get rid of even more sodium. So that's a good way to use them. If you want, you don't have to cook them. If you want to use them on top of a salad, you just drain them, rinse them, and then you can use them as a topping to your salad. I got also a can of black-eyed peas and rice, and I only bought one. There were maybe 4 different varieties of canned beans with rice or something else. And as I was researching, I didn't buy anything to show, but there are some rice mixes that have beans or pulses in them. Some of them have lentils, some of them have split peas. So look for those different, and they're more of a convenient way to get your pulses. And then of course we have refried beans, which we're all happy to have here in the Southwest because of we love to have our Mexican food and our bean burritos and things like that. And then we have to remember that baked beans for our picnics and barbecues also have a lot of protein and fiber, even though they're yummy and sweet. So half a cup of these is 190 calories, where a half a cup of these is just 100 calories. And a half a cup of these is just 100 calories. So you have to remember that calorically, when you add a lot of stuff to your beans, it's going to add to the calories and the sodium content. But even at that, these have 7 grams of protein for a half a cup, and 4 grams of dietary fiber. So they're still a great food, and just eat them in moderation. One of the things that I try to do, and if you talk to my husband, he would tell you all about our pantry, and we keep it full. You know, when COVID first started, everybody started stocking up their pantries. Well, I just didn't, and so our pantry sort of dwindled, and then I had a hard time replenishing it, but it is replenished now, and it's full, and I have a lot of canned beans because they are a convenient way to get a lot of protein and fiber into a meal quickly. Like I said earlier, there's nothing like a pot of beans on the back burner of the stove, but we can eat a quick meal if I have a variety of beans. So what I might do is, and also I do this for our local food bank, I put together kits that can show someone how to make a quick meal out of just their pantry. So I might put a can of cannellini beans and a can of kidney beans and maybe a can of garbanzo beans. Once again, I would rinse them off and drain them, put them in a soup pot, and then I would add maybe a can of diced green chilies and maybe a can of tomatoes that maybe have some onions, celery. These happen to have green chilies, but you can find varieties that have other vegetables in them. And then I probably add some corn because I love corn and beans together. You can also season them with something like a taco seasoning. Probably have to have a little bit more broth or water. A good way to thicken it up is to mash some of those beans, and then the starch on the inside of the bean comes out and helps thicken your soup or your chili, whatever you want to call it. But just by putting those things together, you would have a quick meal on the table in less than 30 minutes. All you need to do is serve it with maybe crackers or cornbread, and you'd have a great high fiber, high protein, delicious meal, especially on a cold winter night. And what have you invested? You can see that it's going to make quite a pot full because each of these has about almost 2 cups in each can, so you're going to have quite a pot of soup. And each of these cans, when they're on sale, is less than $1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This might be a little bit more. This might be $1.29. So about $5 or $6 that you are going to invest in that big pot of soup, and it will last several days in the refrigerator, and it's a great thing to take to work. It's a great thing to have for dinner or for lunch the next day. So you can really, beans are just so versatile. Pulses are just so versatile because you can use them in so many ways. And if you look at that website that I told you about, it really, really has some ideas about how to use beans and peas and lentils and all the pulses. So I encourage you to go there, and I think that's about it. If you were here and we could have this in person, I would be giving you each something to take home with you. But since I can't do that, I just hope that COVID goes away soon and that we can get back to having in-person classes. And until then, if you want to chat in person, I am available for appointments to help you with your health. I can help you if you have heart disease or diabetes, or if you want to manage your weight better. I can help you learn how to meal prep on the weekend. I can share simple recipes with you. And so all you need to do is call my scheduler. Her name is Sandy, and her number is 928-668-1811. So if you'd like to chat, I encourage you to make an appointment. And otherwise, just continue to watch for my series of Facebook Live classes, and I hope that you'll attend the next one. And I have forgotten what it is, but I think it's about oils. It is. I think it is. So if it isn't, we'll have that one of these days. So if you have any questions or comments, you can always email me as well. And my email address is Debra, D-E-B-R-A, .Loder, L-O-D-E-R, at WICKHOSP. So it's WICKHOSP.com. So I hope that you'll join us again. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.